Picture this. You're 17. You're standing in front of an altar, a Roman officer is holding a sword over your head, and you're about to swear an oath. You're pledging your life and your absolute loyalty to a distant emperor you will almost certainly never meet. You're vowing to obey every command, to never desert, and to face death for the glory of Rome. The life you knew, it's over. For a young man in the Roman world, this wasn't some terrible nightmare. It was a calculated risk. It was a long shot. It was a path to a future that was otherwise completely out of reach. This was the first step on a 25-year journey of brutal discipline, bloody conflict, and unwavering routine. This is the story of that journey from the training grounds that turned boys into living weapons, to the chaotic front lines that defined an empire, and finally to the quiet fields of a veteran who survived it all to build the world we know. So, who was the typical guy who made this life-altering choice? In the early days of the Republic, military service was basically a civic duty. If you were a citizen who owned land, you were expected to pick up a sword and defend it when needed. But as Rome's ambitions grew and its borders stretched from the misty hills of Britain to the scorching sands of Syria, it needed a permanent professional army. This is where the Marian reforms of 107 BC come in, a game changer that transformed the legions. Property requirements were gradually phased out, opening the ranks to the capite censi, the head count, Rome's poorest landless citizens. Suddenly, the army wasn't just a duty, it was a job. For a kid from a crowded city slum or a family of struggling farmers, the legions offered what society couldn't: a steady paycheck, a shot at adventure, and the ultimate prize, a secure retirement. The recruitment process itself was a practical, often humbling affair. Hopefuls, usually between 17 and 23, would present themselves to a recruiting officer for a probatio bal, a series of tests to weed out the unfit. First things first, you had to be a Roman citizen. If you weren't, you could join the auxilia, support units that fought alongside the legions, with the incredible incentive of earning full Roman citizenship for yourself and your children after 25 years of service. Physical fitness was everything. A recruiter looked for a young man with a strong build and powerful legs, someone who could handle the legendary Roman marches. For elite units, they even had a preferred height, ideally around 5'7", which was pretty tall for the time. They'd check your eyesight and look for any old injuries. They'd also ask if you had any useful skills. A carpenter, a blacksmith, or a stonemason brought a lot more to the legion than just a strong sword arm. For those who passed, the deal was sealed. Your life wasn't entirely your own anymore. Once you passed the examination, your old life might as well have been on another planet. Your new one began with the Sacramentum Militare. This wasn't just a pledge of allegiance, it was a sacred oath that bound a soldier's very soul to the emperor and the state. He swore to execute all commands, never desert, and not shrink from death. Breaking this oath was a sacrilege, and the punishments were merciless. Desertion could easily get you killed. Discipline was the bedrock of the Roman army, and the sacramentum was its divine foundation. After the oath, the recruit was given a small sign-on bonus and sent to his legion, often in a province he'd only heard stories about. Failure to report was not an option. This is where the real work began. The next 4 to 6 months were a relentless boot camp designed to break a man down and rebuild him as one part of a lethal machine. At its core was marching. Recruits were forced on marches up to 20 miles a day, loaded down with a full pack that could weigh over 45 pounds. Weapons training was just as grueling. They'd spend hours striking a wooden post called a palus. To build up strength, their practice gear, a wicker shield and wooden sword, was deliberately made twice as heavy as the real thing. They were taught not to slash like a movie hero, but to thrust a much deadlier technique in the crush of a shield wall. They mastered the pilum, a heavy javelin designed to bend after it hit an enemy's shield, rendering it useless. Day after day, under the watchful eye of their centurions, they drilled formations. They learned to form the testudo, or tortoise, an almost impenetrable shell of shields perfect for sieges. They learned to move as one, responding instantly to a horn blast or a shouted command. The centurions, tough veterans who had come up through the ranks, were the unforgiving engine of this transformation. Their vine staff was a constant symbol of authority, used to point out instructions and often to beat discipline into anyone who slacked off. But it wasn't just about breaking them, it was also about building them up together. Recruits were organized into a contubernium, a squad of 8 men who shared a tent, ate together and fought side by side. These men became a family, forged in shared misery and sweat. They learned to trust the man to their left and right with their life. This bond was Rome's secret weapon, turning an army of individuals into a brotherhood. The popular image of a Roman soldier is all glorious battle and epic charges. The reality? For most of his 25-year career, it was a lot more mundane. Combat was actually pretty rare. Most of a legionary's time was spent in the structured, repetitive, and often mind-numbing routine of garrison life. The day started before sunrise. After a quick breakfast, it was time for the morning muster. Officers would take roll call, inspect the men and their gear, and hand out the day's assignments. A secret password for the day was also distributed, essential for getting around the camp after dark. What followed was a long day of chores, and the chores were endless. Some guys would get guard duty on the walls, incredibly important, but also incredibly boring. Others would be on maintenance detail, cleaning the camp, repairing gear, or mucking out the latrines. For many, the day just meant more training. Even veterans had to run daily drills to stay sharp. But a Roman legionary was much more than just a soldier. He was a builder. Much of the iconic infrastructure you can still see today. The straight, durable roads, the mighty bridges, the aqueducts, and the very forts they lived in was built by soldiers. They were a massive skilled labor force, quarrying stone, felling timber, and digging trenches, physically stamping Roman authority onto the landscape. The main meal of the day was usually a simple but hearty stew of grain or beans, with bread and some sour wine. In the evenings, those not on night watch finally got some precious free time. They'd gamble with dice, play music, write letters home, and meticulously care for their equipment, knowing their life depended on it. And just to make sure they never got too comfortable, about 3 times a month they'd undertake an ambulatura. The whole legion would march 10 miles out of camp in full gear, run through mock battles, and then march all the way back. It was a brutal reminder that no matter how quiet things were, they were a fighting force, and war was always just one order away. While garrison life was the norm, the whole point of a legionary was war. Going on campaign meant leaving the relative safety of the fort behind. A soldier would pack his sarsana, a heavy pack carried on a pole, stuffed with rations, cooking gear, a shovel, a pickaxe, and stakes for building the fortified camp they constructed at the end of every single day's march. All in, with armor and weapons, a legionary could be carrying more than half his body weight. The march itself was relentless, often through hostile territory, where the threat of ambush was constant, and disease spreading through the camp was often a deadlier enemy than any warrior. A pitched battle was the terrifying climax of any campaign. When the order came, the air would fill with the blare of trumpets and the shouts of centurions. The first move was often a volley of pilla. From about 30 yards out, thousands of these heavy javelins would rain down on the enemy, a devastating opening strike. Then came the clash. It was brutal, personal, and claustrophobic. The legionary would advance behind a wall of shields, relying purely on his training. Keep the shield up, protect the man next to you, and use your gladius for short, sharp, deadly thrusts. The goal was to maintain the formation at all costs because the broken line meant slaughter. It was the ultimate test of courage, discipline, and the bond he shared with his brothers. For those who proved their valor, there were rewards. A soldier could earn dona militaria, military decorations like the torque, a golden necklet, or phalarai, ornamental discs worn on the chest during parades. These brought incredible prestige. More importantly, real skill and leadership could lead to promotion. A common soldier could become an immunis, a specialist exempt from boring duties who got paid more. The next step was optio, the centurion's second in command. And for the best of the best, there was the centurionate itself, a position of immense respect and the highest rank most soldiers could ever hope to achieve. For 25 years he served. He marched thousands of miles, endured punishing weather, and looked death in the face time and again. If he was one of the lucky ones who made it, he earned his honesta missio, an honorable discharge. This was the moment he had been working toward for his entire adult life. Upon retirement, a veteran received his premia militare, a retirement package. This often came as a grant of fertile land, maybe in a newly conquered province or a special veteran colony called a colonia. These settlements were key to Romanizing the frontiers, as the vets brought Roman laws, language, and customs with them. Later on, under emperors like Augustus, this was standardized, and a veteran could choose a big cash payout instead, often equal to more than 10 years' salary. For the auxiliary soldier, retirement brought the ultimate prize, full Roman citizenship for himself and his children. This was a life-changing reward that elevated his family's social and legal status for generations, and was one of the most powerful tools for integrating people into the empire. Life as a veteranus was one of respect. These retired soldiers were pillars of their communities. Their military discipline often made them natural local leaders, and many became town officials or successful businessmen. They were living symbols of Rome's power and reach, transitioning from being the enforcers of the empire to being its foundation, embedding Roman culture in the very lands they had once conquered with a sword. If you found this trip through a legionary's life fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into history. Let us know in the comments, what part of Roman military life blows your mind the most? The brutal training, the daily grind, or the final reward? The career of a Roman soldier was an incredible journey. It started with an oath that took away a young man's freedom and ended for the survivors with land, status, and security. These men weren't just the most effective soldiers of their time. They were the builders, engineers, and colonists who constructed and maintained one of the greatest empires in history. From the walls they built to the roads they paved, their legacy is etched into the world's landscape. They were the sinews of an empire, the ordinary men who accomplished the extraordinary. Their story is the story of Rome itself,